Hey, this is Vu, and today I'm going to be talking about opping on CT side. And it's important to recognize here that as an opper, if you're trying to play passive or aggressive, you're actually exploiting different play styles and different gameplay in your opponents, and you should be able to recognize that when you're looking at your play style. Now, of course, it's important to be able to play both play styles effectively, passive and aggressive. However, most people are going to find that their play style kind of generally ends up in one direction because of their actual strengths as a person. So if you have quick reactions, very quick flicks, and you can hit every shot, you're probably going to want to end up playing a little bit more aggressive on CT side. And if you're a little bit more passive because you have slower reactions, you have a little bit tougher time winning those aim duels, you miss a few shots but you can hit consistently the easy shots, then you're probably going to end up playing a little bit more passive. Now, when I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about the different playstyles that you actually exploit when you're playing these different playstyles, because as a passive player, a lot of the time what you're really exploiting is you are shutting down, locking down a bomb site, preventing your opponents from going there. And you're really exploiting your opponent's riflers, and a lot of the time you're exploiting their opper, whereas in an aggressive playstyle, a lot of the time you're trying to avoid your opponent's opper, you're trying to go specifically for their riflers and get advantageous engagements where your opponents aren't expecting you. When you're playing this passive playstyle, which I'll go into first, you're actually kind of in a position where your opponents probably a lot of the time have some idea the general place where you could be. And so a lot of the time what you're doing is you're forcing your opponents on all of their strategies to be worried that you could be in certain locations, that you could be in certain spots, and you're trying to play around those expectations to be able to still grab a shot or two from an advantage and fall back into another advantageous engagement. So a lot of the time this is going to take fairly smart gameplay from yourself, the ability to reposition quickly and effectively, use flashes to help re-peak angles and things like this, whereas aggressive play is a little bit more intuitive. So when you're playing passively, the first thing to recognize here is it really depends on your skill level, or rather the level you're playing in. If you're somewhere below DMG, you're probably going to find that your opponents are very rarely doing things like smoking off CT, flashing over, flashing to peak angles, flashing to clear angles out, or having a rifler peek out and an opper post up, things like that. You're going to find that in lower ranks, these things rarely happen, and thereby a passive playstyle is much more effective than in higher ranks. The reason aggressive playstyles end up being so much more common, not only, of course, because they're effective, but also because it becomes much harder to play this passive playstyle when your opponents know what they're doing. So if you're at these lower ranks, you can really just kind of sit in positions, and this is the reason that people think ops are overpowered. You can really sit in this spot. You're long range, you can hit the easy shots, and a lot of the time you can just continuously re-peak because your opponents don't have the aim to actually hit the headshot at that long range, and they don't have the utility usage to push you off the angle either, so the seems incredibly strong. However, as you get to higher levels, like I said, you need to be focusing on how you can reposition from any given angle. You want to be putting yourself in situations where you can get a shot off, you can fall back, get another shot, and you're not putting yourself in disadvantageous engagements at any given point. And this is what makes passive opping so hard. A lot of the time people try and default into an aggressive op style because you actually have the advantage there a lot of the time, and you can take the fight to your opponents as long as you can hit your shots. Now, the other thing I mentioned about passive opping is that you can actually exploit your opponent's opper. The thing is, a lot of the time, you know, for an average player, as long as your reaction times aren't like Kenny S and you can just react to whoever you've run into, or actually Henny is one of the players that I've noticed has really the fastest reaction time I might have ever seen. But if you can't just peek straight into your opponent's opper, a lot of the time you can put yourself as an opper in a situation where you're really shutting down your opponent's opper, not giving them the chance to fight against riflers where they have a good advantage. You can be posted up in angles that they're going to peek into and kind of screw them up in a lot of situations, and you can force them into bad spots, because as a T-side opper, the one thing you really are worried about is running to your opponent's opper as he's holding an angle, and the same thing goes on CT side. if you're getting aggressive on CT side, this is one of those angles here where you can expect to run into your opponent's AWPer, and thereby you probably want to avoid this angle a lot of the time because you're a lot less likely to run into a rifler holding this angle, in my opinion, than you are to run into an AWPer holding this angle the majority of the time, and thereby you have a bit of a disadvantage. As an aggressive player, a lot of the time what you're doing is you're exploiting the fact that your opponents are at the beginning of rounds in a spread out format on the majority of their rounds. So that means they're probably running a default most of the time if you're looking at a standard team, and that means they're probably not in situations where they can easily deal with an aggressive AWPer peeking out in different angles. For example, an average spot, a standard spot for a terrorist side to have a player to hold B-apps from is on these stairs here, and this is a great spot if someone peeks out as a rifler because you can continuously be moving, you can get the advantage, and you have a better gun. However, if an AWPer peeks this angle completely ready for the engagement, the AWPer is almost certainly going to win this engagement as long as he can hit the shot. This is true about a wide variety of different angles and a wide variety of different situations, and as with passive AWPing, as you go down the levels, as you get to below DMG, the number of angles where your opponents aren't going to be prepared and aren't going to be able to deal with you is going to be getting higher and higher. So when you look at an AWPer like Kenny S, a lot of the time he does these insane aggressions because the opponents he's playing are good at dealing with the standard aggressions, a peek like this, or for example, a peek down ramp. The higher level the teams you're playing against, especially organized teams rather than pugs, they are going to be starting to effectively deal with these angles, and you can get more and more aggressive in more and more ridiculous ways to try and deal with that. However, as long as you're in pugs, and even at the highest level of pugs, people aren't consistently able to prevent an AWPer from simply peeking out and having a straight up one-on-one against a rifler. And as an aggressive AWPer, a lot of the time that's really all you're looking for, because you have the advantage against riflers. As long as you peek out, you can hit your shot, and you're looking at them as soon as you peek out. You do have that advantage in that you only have to hit a body shot and they have to hit a headshot. So what you're really looking for is new and different ways to try and catch your opponents in situations where you run into a rifler, not an AWPer. You have the ability to hit that shot, and your opponents a lot of the time aren't expecting it to the point where they can flash you off, they can fake peek you, things like that. And that's really what aggression is about. It's about catching your opponents off guard to get those free kills and prevent them from doing what they want to do, which is take all of that map control and then execute on a bomb site with smokes and nades. So the important thing here is to be able to combine these play styles to play aggressive early round and then play a little bit more passive late round. Now that's for aggressive AWPers, you absolutely need to be doing that, and you also need to be switching up and playing a passive style some of the rounds, specifically rounds where you have a bad spawn. You probably want to play a little bit more of a passive style, especially on maps that are more spawn based. For example, DE Cache, you have a lot of spawn based plays that you can make. If you have a forward spawn, you can peek A main, you can peek B main, but if you have a more back spawn, you have to play a little bit more passive, and you can mix that up to prevent your opponents from expecting you to do things and setting up their AWPer in situations where you can catch you off guard and grab that free kill on you. This is assuming, again, that you don't have the reaction time to just peek into these disadvantageous engagements and grab those free kills. So you want to be focusing on that. As a passive AWPer, you do want to be playing a little bit more aggressive, but you want to be playing aggressive in different ways. An aggressive, quote-unquote, aggressive AWPer is the type of AWPer that's going up for these peaks in A-ramp. They're going for the peaks in B-apps. They're going for the peaks in a palace that are very aggressive plays. However, as a passive AWPer, that doesn't mean you need to sit back at ticket booth the whole round and kind of chill here. That's how you get destroyed, really. That's how you get yourself in a situation where there's no real way for you to reposition after they smoke you off. A good example of something you could do as a passive AWPer to try and deal with that is to potentially be playing, for example, let's say middle, you get mollied off, and you start at a fairly aggressive angle. So this isn't necessarily very aggressive, this is somewhat aggressive, but you want to start in an angle forward enough that you can fall back consistently. So you can peek here, fall off. If there's a smoke top mid, you can potentially peek here, fall back, you can play here. This is another angle you can hold. You can fall back, and then you can fall back to ticket booth. Once you've been pushed off middle, you can play from ticket booth, where you can worry about middle from back here, or you can worry about ramp, things like that. So as a passive opper, it's not about sitting back and playing all the way back, waiting for your opponents to push into you, at least not against good opponents. However, you want to be pushing a little bit forward, playing an angle where you can fall back effectively if you need to, over and over and over, and waste their utility by trying to push you off of different angles that you're sitting at. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.